Hello and welcome back to the tutorial series on how to make a top-down 2D survival shooter. In this video, we'll be looking at creating our HUD and our shop for the game. We'll then also be integrating the scripts that we worked on in the previous video. Let's add the GameController and Wave Manager to the GameController object that we have, and then let's start by making our UI game objects. So let's start by creating a canvas in the hierarchy, and we'll be calling this UI. This will have everything related to our shop, health bars, and menus as children. Next, we want to create 3 empty game objects under the UI. The first will be called Death, the second is called Shop, and the third is called HUD. We'll stretch all of them to cover the screen, and to do this, we open the anchor presets, and by pressing Shift and Alt on Windows, or Shift and Option on Mac, we can select the stretch option in the bottom right corner of the window. Let's start work with our HUD. So this will have the cash we gain from killing enemies, our player's health bar, a kill count, and our crosshair. So let's under HUD create a new image. This will be called HP, and we want it to be set to the bottom of our screen, stretching horizontally. We then want to set the image with a height of 20, and then we'll change the color of the image to red with the image type of filled with horizontal and the origin being left. With this, when the player takes damage, the fill amount will reduce until it hits 0, which results in the player's death. Next, let's create 3 Text Mesh Pro text under HUD. The first will be called Wave Count, the second will be called Money, and the third will be called Pause. We want our wave text to be sized at 36 and aligned to the middle and center. We want small caps, and let's set it to the top left of the window with a width of 400 and a height of 200. We want the same done to the money text game object, so the size is 36, aligned to the middle, and centered with small caps. We then want to set it to the top right corner with a width of 400 and a height of 200. With our last game object, we want to type P for pause, and we want to do the same inside the text box. We will align it to the top right corner with a width of 400 and a height of 200, and change the X position to -200. This will push the text 200 pixels to the left, and we also want the text size to be 36, aligned to the left and in the middle. With this complete, let's create the last part of the HUD game object. We create a new empty game object, and we'll call this Crosshair. Under Crosshair, we want a new image called Top. Its Y position will be 8, and its size will be 2 by 8. We want to duplicate this and rename the copy to Bot, and change the Y position to -8. Next, we duplicate again and rename the object to Left. We change the X position to -8 and Y to 0. The width will be by 8 and the height will be 2. We duplicate that again and we want to rename it to Right. Then we want to change the X position to 8, and then we'll create a new script called Follow Mouse. This will make the crosshair follow where our mouse will be. Let's open it and type the following. Vector 3 target position, and then in our start function we want cursor.visible is equal to false. So this will hide our mouse, and then we want in comments, cursor.lockState is equal to cursor.lockMode.confined. So when you uncomment this code, the mouse will stop going off the screen. This is if you want to do a build, and so the mouse won't just fly off into another window. Next, we go into our update function, and then we want to type target pos or position is equal to new vector3 in brackets input dot mouse position dot x comma input dot mouse position dot y comma 0. Under that, we want transform dot position is equal to target pos. With this done, let's add the script to our Crosshair game object. So if we press the play button, we should have our Crosshair game object following where our mouse is going, and it will also hide the default mouse icon. With our HUD complete, let's add the HUD script to our HUD game object and join all the components together. So our player HP is our HP image, money is our money game object, and wave count is our wave count object. So 1/3 of our to-do list for the video is now done. Let's create our death screen, and then we'll be looking at a countdown timer, and then lastly our shop. So now we want to create a new folder under animations called UI. This will contain any UI animations, and now we create a new animator controller, and we'll name that death_C. With a new animation we want to create called death. We then want to open the animator window and add the death animation into the controller. Then we continue onwards with creating our death child objects. So first, let's create an image under the death game object and make that stretch across the entire screen. We'll call it panel. This will be used as a background panel when we fade our death panel in. Before we go any further, let's hide this panel by adding a canvas group to our death game object and change the alpha to 0. Next, let's create a TextMeshPro text object as a child to death. We'll name it title, and then we need to create a TextMeshPro button called retry. We want our title to have text in it, and we'll type "you died," and let's add a sad face to it. Let's have this stretch across the top part of the screen, and we'll make the Y position -200 and the height 50. Style will be small caps and font size will be 48. The text will be centered in the middle, and let's go into our retry button now, and we want that to be centered with a width of 200 and a height of 50. Let's make the button a color tint and change the colors to black. The normal color will have an alpha of 80. Highlighted will be 160. Selected is 200. And the RGB, red, green, blue, will be 10 by 10 by 10. Disabled will have an RGB of 200, and the alpha will be 128. We want to then have the ability to call the restart function from the game controller. So to do this, we have to go to our restart button, and then we'll have to add a new event on the on click and drag the game controller into it. We then select the restart function, so when the player presses the restart button, it will now call the restart function in the game controller. We want to go into the text and type retry with the style of all caps and a font size of 24, aligned to the middle and centered. We then duplicate the button and we'll rename the copy to quit. We'll move its Y position to -100, change the text to quit, and then we also want to change the function it calls from restart to quit. Now we need to create our panel's animation. So we want to add an animator controller to our death game object and add the death controller from the project window to the controller in the hierarchy. Next, we want to open the animation tab, and before we hit the record button, we want to set our death game object to have its top position as 770 and its bottom position to be -770. Then make the interactable false and block raycasts false. With this done, we can now hit the record button on the animation. This will record any changes we do to the death game object and its children. We then want to tick the interactable and blocks raycasts so they equal true. We then move to 40 frames into the animation, and then we change the top and bot positions of the death game object to 0. To smooth out the animation, we then want to go to frame 38 and change the top and bot positions to 2 and -2. We then add another keyframe at 30 frames and change the alpha to 1. We then change the top and bot positions to 50 and -50. We can now untick the record button and preview the animation to see if it works properly. Once done, the last change we want is to change the update mode to unscaled, so when we stop time, the animation will not stop. Halfway with the video now. Before we move on to the shop, let's do some more coding. So let's create a new script called countdown, and this will be used, called from the countdown animation that we'll be creating after this. Public int with a lowercase c countdown from is equal to 2, and then we want a private int count. Then in our start function, we have count is equal to countdown from, and then we're going to create a new public void function called countdown from as well. In the function, we then have get component text mesh pro uGUI dot text is equal to count dot toString. Mind you that to use this, we need a namespace called using tmpro. Under that, count minus minus, and below that, if count is less than or equal to 0, then count is equal to countdown from. Later, we'll be creating a countdown animation, and in that, we'll be calling the scripts function. This will reduce the number in the countdown text in the animation that we create later. The next piece of code we want to create is in a new script called follow player. So let's create that. We'll be attaching this script onto our player, and it'll allow us to follow our player around our little scenic map that we have. So let's create this new script called follow player, and we'll type the following. So public transform target, and then in the update function, we then want transform dot position is equal to new vector3 target dot transform dot position dot x comma target dot transform dot position dot y comma transform dot position dot z. Quick and easy. So this will make the X and Y position on the camera equal to the player's, so we can track it. We'll want to add this to our main camera, and then the target will be the player. Next, we'll look at adding the countdown animation for our game, and we'll finish off with the shop. With the countdown, we'll need to create a new animation controller called Wave, and then _C for controller. We then need to create a new animation, and we'll be calling that countdown. We'll create a new Text Mesh Pro text object under the UI, and we're going to call that countdown. Next, we're going to place an animator to the countdown game object that we created, and we're going to drag the wave _C controller onto the animator. We're going to stretch the countdown object to cover the whole screen, and the bottom position will be 350. Our text will say 3 with an alpha of 0. The font size will be 148, and the text will be centered in the middle. We then want to add the countdown script to the object, and the countdown will be from 3. We then want to select our WaveController, and then we're going to drag the countdown animation we created into it. Next, we're going to select the countdown game object with the animator, and then we go to our animation window, and we're going to hit the record button. On the first frame, we want the alpha of the text to be 255, and then on frame 59, we want the scale of the text to be 0.6, and the alpha will be 0. On frame 60, we want the alpha to be 255 with the scale of 1. We then want to copy these two frames, 59 and 60, and then paste these at 120, or frame 120. And then we want to do the same at frame 180 as well. We want the alpha to stay at 0, so we want to remove the last frame of keyframes. And then on the frames 0, 60, 120, and 180, we want to add an event, and it will call our countdown from function on the countdown script. With this done, we should have a countdown at the start of every wave when integrated into the game controller. For the last bit of this tutorial, and for what I had planned for the series, will be the shop. Let's start off by actually deactivating the shop, so let's do that. And then we want to add a canvas group to the shop game object. We're then going to add an image as a child to the shop and have it stretched to cover the entire screen. We'll make the color black with an alpha of 100. We'll name it panel, and this will be our background for the shop. Next, we're going to create a new Text Mesh Pro text, and the name will be called title. In the text field, we'll type shop. The style will be in small caps with a font size of 48, and it will be centered in the middle. We then want to go into our death panel and duplicate the retry button, and then drag it into the shop panel. Let's name it upgrade damage, or DMG. The button will have a new position of 200 by 48, and the size will be 200 by 50. Inside the button, we want to create a new Text Mesh Pro text, and it will cover the entire button. We then want to change its top position to -50, and the bottom will be 50. The font size will be 18, and auto size is true. Text will be in small caps and centered in the middle. Both text fields will be bold, and we'll name the first text field 50 and the second will be named DESC or description. We want to copy the button we made 3 more times. The first will be named upgrade fire rate or FR, second will be upgrade HP, and third will be upgrade regen. Next, we want to create a new Text Mesh Pro text as a child to shop. It will be named Pistol, and we want the position to be stretched horizontally across the top part of the canvas. Left will be 200, and top is minus 150. Right is minus 200, and the height will be 50. The text will be underlined in small caps and centered in the middle with a font size of 24. Next, we want to duplicate the game object and rename the new one to player. The left position will be minus 200 and the right position will be 200. The text will have player. With this done, we just got to hook it up to the game controller. So let's go to our first upgrade button and we'll add a new event to the onClick and we'll call the game controller by pistol damage function. The upgrade fire rate button we have will have by pistol fire rate from the game controller. Our upgrade HP button will have the by max health function from the game controller, and the last will have by regen. Let's join this all together on the game controller's side. So the upgrade cost is all 50, money should be 0, and let's add our components in. So HUD will reference our HUD script, shop will reference the shop game object, game over menu will be our death screen, and then we want to reference the descriptions of the upgrade buttons. Once that's done, let's go to our wave manager now, and we'll have time between waves as 3 seconds. Our enemy multiplier will be 1. Our radius will be 50, and the inner will be 30. Origin point will be 0, 0, 0, and our B will be the B prefab we made a while back. The wave anim is the countdown animation we created, and our debug wave count should be 1 with a check interval of 2. We'll tick check gizmos so it's true. This will show us the enemy spawns in the editor. Just before we press the play button, let's fix up some things I forgot to add throughout the video. So first will be our death controller. We need to add an empty state into it and set it as our default. This is so then our death animation isn't played instantly on load. We also need to do the same thing to our wave controller, and we need to add a transition from the countdown to the new state. We then remove the B prefab and the particle effect. Lastly, we want to go to our game controller and highlight all the audio sources under it, and we need to untick the play on awake. This will stop the audio sources playing their audio as soon as we press the start button. One more thing before we press the play button is that we need to change the positions of the shop upgrades. So the upgrade fire rate button will have a Y position of minus 100. The HP button will have minus 189 on its X, and on the Y position it will be 48. The regen will have an X value of minus 189 and on the Y position minus 100. The text in the first text game object in the buttons will need to be changed to 50 as well. This will now show the price of upgrades and stop the buttons from being clumped on top of each other. We also want to go to our UI and go to the canvas scaler. We need to change the scale mode to scale with screen size and change the reference resolution to an X value of 1920 and a Y value of 1080. This will be for 2K resolutions. With this done, we should be able to finally press the play button and we should have a top-down 2D survival shooter. We can shoot the enemy bees and they'll have a dying animation. We can press P for pause and it will also open the shop as well. It will pause the game and we can only buy upgrades when we have $50, and when we do buy an upgrade, it will take $50 from our stash. We'll also have a countdown for when our waves finish, and the wave manager will check if there's any enemies left after 2 seconds. If there's none, then it will start the next wave with an extra enemy. Thank you for staying throughout my first tutorial series. This episode will be the last of the top-down survival shooter, and I'll be focusing more on creating my own games rather than tutorials like this, as I'm sure that's a lot more interesting to watch and it's a whole lot more fun to make. If you want help with anything, I can make more tutorial videos like this later on, or on specifics. You can also join me on my Discord and ask for help there. Again, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in my next video.